When it comes to creating happier workplaces, HR professionals are often expected to lead the way. But with everything that HR teams already juggle, like compliance, people issues, and policies, it's easy for the employee experience strategies to fall into the too hard basket. So how can HR professionals be the champions of happiness in the workplace without burning themselves out and while still meeting business needs? That's exactly what we're exploring in today's episode. I'm thrilled to be joined by Lisa Young, an experienced HR consultant and founder of Your HR HQ. Lisa works with businesses across New Zealand to create positive, people-centered workplaces, and she's all about making workplace happiness practical, achievable, and sustainable through intentional policy design. I often say that I think in the 30,000-foot view and the big picture idea of happiness in the employee experience, Lisa is on the ground doing the detailed work and helping HR professionals make a meaningful impact. So I'm going to call it now. If you are a HR professional or a people culture professional, this is mandatory listening. You're not allowed to click out of this podcast. I hereby forbid it. You must listen to it. And if you're not in that profession, but you're a manager or a leader at your workplace thinking, well, how can I better partner and work with my HR team and better enable them to drive positive change? I'm not going to say it's an absolute mandatory for you, but it's going to be a strong encouragement for you to listen to it. Now, as always, we have the amazing producer Josh with me for these episodes. Producer Josh, you've just listened to the conversation that Lisa and I shared. What are your insights? What's your key takeaway?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. For anyone that's in that leadership managerial spot that's maybe not in HR or people and culture, there definitely are some little things in here. The main one for me was not thinking of HR as the police, which is definitely my mindset. When I hear HR, I think, but how can we get them involved? How can we help shape everything to avoid them even needing to police things in the first place? So if we can use HR as a tool instead of a hindrance or a threat almost, how can we get them in to better our workplaces and the overall happiness of our staff from that perspective as well?
So, without further ado, let's learn how HR can drive happier workplaces and play their role in enhancing the employee experience with our amazing guest, Lisa Young. Lisa, I am so excited to have you on the show for actually a multiple set of reasons that I'm going to share with our listeners before we really dive into things. One, you are our first international guest on the show, which is perfect timing because this episode is coming out on International Day of Happiness. Secondly, you and I are actually going to be meeting in person for the first time today, the day that people are listening to this show. We will have met to do a talk in Auckland all about happiness in the workplace. And thirdly, we were talking just before I pressed record. And I wanted to share this because I didn't want the audience to miss out on this gem and this insight. I think the value and insight you bring as a professional in terms of the actual implementation, right? The down to earth, hands-on, getting things done is so valuable. I know I often get caught up in the concept and the strategy, and I can be a little bit too overly optimistic around what does it look like to have happy, flourishing, thriving workplaces. And actually, I had someone say to me once, Declan, it's a strength and a curse that you're thinking about 100 years ahead of where we're at with workplaces. We need to also go, this is what's going to work now in helping people immediately. And I think you do that so beautifully. So with all that said, first and foremost, thank you for coming on the show.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so keen for what we're going to unpack on this one. To start with, a question that I like to throw to everyone to start with. From your perspective, what is workplace wellbeing? What is workplace happiness? What is these concepts that I speak about? Flourishing, happiness, wellbeing. What does that actually mean from your perspective in a workplace setting?
Yeah, look, I think everyone has a pretty good understanding of what happiness is just in general life. But when we're looking at it in a workplace setting, workplace wellbeing to me is, I guess, really simply just how people feel at work every day. And then as a result, how that impacts how they perform. So it's about creating an environment where employees feel happy and feel good and in order to be able to do their best work. So for me, that's not fruit bowls or yoga. It's psychological safety. It's, ensuring that they have meaningful work and all of the tools, resources, and support to do that meaningful work. And just, I guess, healthy relationships with leaders and with colleagues. So I guess when it's prioritized, it creates a ripple effect across the entire organization, and it's going to have really positive impacts for the business if it's prioritized. So yeah, workplace wellbeing to me, as a summary, is how employees feel day to day in their work.
I love that. And you're really speaking my language with a couple of concepts you touched on there. The idea of the ripple effect that spreads throughout the organization, the strategic benefit that it spreads to the organization. I'm curious, talk to me a little bit and share with our listeners a bit about your professional history and experience and story, and how that may have shaped and influenced your approach to or your definition of workplace wellbeing.
Yeah, I think, look, I'll be honest, early in my career, I did see it as primarily about programs. So things like initiatives, EAP, ergonomic setups, how do we make sure people are happy and healthy in their workplace? And to me, that was those sorts of things. So I think I've come to realize, though, that it's not so much about well-being and its perks. It's more about how the work is designed and how people experience the work every day. For me, a really key milestone in my career, was actually a very key milestone in the world, actually, was COVID. I think COVID completely reshaped the way that we think about work and well-being, and it kind of forced organizations and HR professionals to really confront the realities of the employee experience in the way that had never been done before. So I think we were forced at that point to look at where and when work happens, flexibility, gaps in leadership and communication and stuff. And I think that was a big milestone around how, I guess, workplace wellbeing was viewed. It wasn't as much as the in-person experience as well. I think, like I said, it's kind of shifted towards those systemic factors I talked about before. So psychological safety, leadership behaviors, workload expectations. And a simple one is managing stress isn't about yoga sessions and teaching them breathing techniques. Managing stress is actually looking at how the work is designed and is that reasonable, and what support are they giving to be able to deliver in the role. So yeah, I think looking back, I do cringe to think a little bit about some of the initiatives that I had done, and how the employees must have felt. They're probably thinking like, yeah, Lisa, the step challenge is great and this lunchtime yoga is awesome, but I'm still drowning in work and my manager's a dickhead. So what are you going to do about that? So yeah, I think it's been a good shift and a good change to view it more in that way, in the systemic piece as well.
Yeah, and look, I want to honor and recognize the humanity of that too. Of like, someone once shared with me, actually someone I look up to as being incredible in their field, said, "I'm so thankful to the people who let me experiment on them early in my career." And I was like, that's a funny perspective to you. And because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was in my first few years of trying this. And he goes, now I've got this great illustrious career and I'm seen as an expert in my field. But man, at the start, I look back and I cringe on some of the stuff that I tried. And I'm
Yeah,
so thankful that people were there to let me try that. And I
yeah.
know I have the same perspective, and by the sounds of it, you do as well.
I think it's a Henry Ford quote. I think he said, if you're not ashamed or embarrassed of your first product, you probably waited too long to launch. So yeah, I feel that same way. Like, I definitely did things wrong. I definitely had to learn. I definitely did initiatives that didn't land well to get that learning.
Ironically, people are currently listening to the second iteration and version of me hosting a podcast. So
Good.
when we talk about having a first one
There
that was
you
a
go.
test run, we're literally living it right now.
Yeah.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into that shift in perspective on happiness and well-being at work that you mentioned, from something that is more perks oriented and program oriented to something that is more systemic. I think it's such a meaningful and important shift, but I can also recognize that that can be a bit scary and tough for workplaces too, right? Because with the perks and policies, you can point to them. You can go, well, look at all the stuff we're doing for well-being and for happiness, and we're supporting our employee experience, and we can tick the box that says we're doing something with this. Whereas when we start talking about those more systemic challenges, like relationship with management and leadership, like psychosocial safety, that's harder to point at. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's certainly not easy. And I guess for me, like, again, I've learned a lot of this through trial and error, but it's just getting deep into the detail. And I think as HR practitioners, if we don't intimately understand and know our business, then we can't be effective, right? Like, if we don't know what the pain points are, what the stresses are, what our people are experiencing, how they operate day to day, then it's really going to be a challenge. So for me, like a key one that I have done a bit of work on with some clients recently is just around job design. So job design isn't just whacking together a job description and saying, here's all the tasks and duties you need to do. It's taking a step further. So, okay, here's the tasks and duties. How do we design the role to make it more engaging and more meaningful? For example, if it was, say, a receptionist role, yes, we need someone answering emails. Yes, we need someone answering the phone. Is that going to be a lonely role? Is that going to be a repetitive role? If we have people working in warehouses or on, conveyor belts and things like that, like is the repetitive work going to keep them engaged? Can we do rotations? Is there ways that we can design the role to ensure that we can optimize the engagement and the enjoyment and the job satisfaction of that person? Yeah, I think it's certainly not easy. I know, and there's discussions happening quite often inside my membership about this whole shift lately that TikTok seems to tell me is driven by Gen Z, but really this whole people first, strategy in a business. And I know I have a lot of HR professionals and a lot of my clients and a lot of, employers saying, I just want the work done. I don't have time to, everyone's got these demands and flexible working. And I don't want to have people flexible working. I want people in my business. I need them here. And I think it's just a shift in mindset from, and all the things that I know that you advocate for a lot is the outcomes of those things. So, yes, maybe flexible working isn't your ideal business strategy, but what is the impacts of doing that if that's not what your people want? And where is the middle ground and how can we work on that? So yeah, sometimes, and I do get that pushback when I work with leaders. Like, for example, like I mentioned, the roles about job design. Some of them are like, God, I don't care. I just need a receptionist to answer the phones. And I was like, okay, well, if you'd like to have 4 receptionists over the next 12 months, by all means, let's do that. But how can we prioritize their engagement and their enjoyment in the role to ensure that we don't have those retention issues, to ensure that they are engaged and provide that pleasant customer experience for you? So it's a mindset shift, and it's definitely a challenge, and it's still very much happening out there and very new.
Yeah, it sounds it. And I think what we're wading into here is another topic I wanted to unpack with you, this tension that I find can exist between people experience and policy design.
Mm.
Like, are we going to be a people-led organization or a policy-led organization? And even, is that a false dichotomy, right? To say, well, we have to be one or the other. And is it more about how do we get those two to work together? I know I see a lot of rhetoric. I'm imagining you'd see a lot more of this with your membership and the connection that you have to all of these HR professionals and people and culture professionals. But sometimes they can feel like a bit of a tension between, well, our values or our culture statements, what we're saying we're doing for people experience says one thing, but our policies say something else. Can you talk to that for a little bit for us?
It's a hard one, and I'm all for this people first culture push. I really truly am bought into and believe, and it's evidence that, more engaged staff are going to result in better business, performance and objectives. So I get it, but I also know in practice that's very challenging sometimes. So I think at the end of the day, if we're looking at prioritizing processes and policy over people, it's challenging because we should, the right answer is that we should be prioritizing processes and policies because that's how a business operates. We need processes. But in my view, I think it's like you said, it's not either or. I think it's about alignment because processes and people go hand in hand. There's no processes without people. So by focusing on your processes, you're also focusing on your people. For me, it's just ensuring that you have HR at the table in those discussions, or at very least asking, what does this mean for our people? Like, great, we want to put this new initiative in, we want to do these new policies, we want to introduce this new, project. What does this mean for our people? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones delivering on that and living and breathing it every day. So yeah, I think, I come from a very strategic approach to HR, and that of course means that all of the activity and initiatives that I'm working on align to the business strategy to help the business achieve its goals. I also think though that the only way to do that is through your people. That's what HR does, right? How do we achieve our business goals through our people? That's the only way to do it. So it's like you said, it's not an either or.
And to your point there, it means for that integration and that connection to work, where our policies and our strategies, whatever we're rolling out, are in support of our people. And actually, I like what you said there. I want to hammer that home, make sure people didn't miss it. there are no policies without people, right? Like it's going to take people to write the policies. It's going to take people to uphold the policies to make sure they're not just words on a bit of paper or, words in a strategic document that gathers dust in a drawer somewhere, right? It's going to take people to make sure those policies work and are utilized, and to get them working together where our people feel supported by our policies rather than blocked by them in their working experience. And you're right, it's an important thing to go, hey, well, does HR have a seat at the table? Are they being consulted on that? Are they being asked about that? Because that's normally where we're going to have our best point. Now, this is going to bring up potentially a controversial chat, which I'm very keen to lean into. I have some opinions. I can be opinionated, and I hope you're opinionated on this as well. We can be opinionated together. I see a lot of talk on LinkedIn these days about, their little quotes and posts that go really well. They get a lot of traction, get a lot of eyes of like, HR is not responsible for culture.
Yeah.
HR is not responsible for, the employee experience. Yeah. And they go so well. And I think part of that maybe is because, perhaps people are frustrated by seeing that as their own, like they're expected to do it all themselves. I don't know. I'm curious to see, why they go well. I'm going to ask you that. But from my perspective, I'm like, hey, I think HR is uniquely positioned to be one of the best voices and assets in an organization to drive things related to the employee experience and to drive things related to happiness, like culture, like psychosocial safety, like the things we've spoken about. What's your thought? Where do you land on this tension, this battle of like, is HR considered responsible for these things? Are they not? What role do they play?
Yeah.
And why are these LinkedIn posts going so well?
Well, it's anything that that's polarizing goes well on LinkedIn, right? People jump in the comments, disagree strongly, agree strongly, and then those people in the comments have conversations. And
I've done this. So you're saying they go well because of me? Like I'm sitting in there just feeding this.
Yeah. All right. So I'm trying to unpick my thoughts. So I agree that HR is definitely uniquely positioned to drive workplace engagement and culture because, well, we're the subject matter experts on people and culture. It's what we do every day. And most often it's what we studied, right? We studied human behavior, psychology, organization dynamics, engagement. I'm pretty sure our IT guys and our finance guys didn't have, modules in their qualifications around that stuff. So we have the knowledge and the insights to be able to support with those things. But I believe too that culture is shaped by the day-to-day interactions in the business between employees and leaders, employees and employees. It's the day-to-day moments, and HR just isn't there for those daily moments. We're not in the minor day-to-day interactions of our staff. So because of that, I think that culture is really everyone's responsibility. But HR does play a key role in setting the conditions and the tone and creating the structures that support it. So I guess HR has a key role in setting those conditions, but it's the leaders and the teams that bring it to life through their actions, through their decisions, and through their behavior. So, I mean, this might not be a good analogy, but I'm just thinking what might be similar. So let's say in a workplace, finance sets the strategy, the policies, they have budget guidelines, but it's the leaders and the managers who day to day are responsible for making those spending decisions, for managing the costs with their team. Finance isn't there at every discussion being like, do you have an invoice for that? Should we be spending that much money? Is this the right training course we're putting them on? It's the leaders and managers' responsibilities day to day to spend that money. Same with, IT. IT provides the systems and the security protocols and the tools to keep the data safe, but it's the employees and the managers who are day to day using those, following best practice and maintaining, the security and utilizing the equipment the right way. So I feel like HR is kind of the same. Like we can set the guidelines, we can put in place structures, we can set expectations, we can do leadership development, but at the end of the day, we're not actually delivering on it day to day. And so therefore, yes, it is our responsibility to oversee a strong culture and recognize when maybe the culture has challenges, but the day-to-day execution of and growth of the culture, I do see fitting with the frontline leaders and staff.
I'm not gonna lie, I was coming into this, little chat thinking, I was like, I wonder if we're gonna be really starkly different perspective on this, and you and I are gonna have a little tussle on live on air. But
that'll be good listening.
But I don't think we have. I'm sitting here being like, no, this makes a lot of sense. And correct me if I'm wrong, from my perspective and what you've shared is like this idea of HR is uniquely positioned to maybe create the space, opportunity, and assets for a positive employee experience, for positive culture, for these systemic changes that we've mentioned earlier in our conversation. But the actual upholding of those, the actual ongoing implementation, whether those assets and opportunity are capitalized on, that's on everyone.
Yeah.
Like that's everyone's shared responsibility as a team to get around. On that point of assets and like, creating opportunity and space for these positive changes, are there particular workplace assets? Because I know we mentioned before, like, hey, these systemic change, we're shifting from a policies and perks approach to employee experience to a systemic approach to it. And that, while the challenge of that is it becomes less tangible, it's harder to point to, it's harder to do a tick box. Um, are there particular assets that you've seen or you've heard about in your experience that you're like, oh, that's a great asset for an organization to have to improve their employee experience?
I would say the most important one and the most obvious one that isn't obvious apparently, according to a lot of workplaces, is leadership development. Like, why are we not if leaders own this, if they execute it, then why are we not upskilling them, giving them the skills to have conversations, identify disengagement, that leadership development piece. Some businesses, they get it, they're investing in leadership development, but most leaders don't get that leadership job because they displayed exceptional leadership capabilities and competencies. They got there because they were a great subject matter expert or a technical expert, doing the doing. And then suddenly they're responsible for the people doing the doing, and they don't have the skills and capabilities. They don't have the knowledge on how to drive engagement and keep people motivated and help, job satisfaction in their people. So I would say that's a key one. Yeah, that'd be probably the most important one. I think if you look at kind of day to day, I spoke about how culture being in the day to day and where HR sits, like it's the day to day conversations. For example, in HR, we have a manager come to us and say, hey, this person's not performing very well. They seem disengaged. They're calling in sick very easily. Their output's slowed down. What do I do? They come to us for advice. We brainstorm, we bounce ideas, we give our insights and input, but then they go away and they execute on that, right? They have those conversations. They, work with us based on what our advice was. So yes, we were a huge part of that with our expertise, but we're certainly not responsible for executing on that. So leadership is the missing piece between, and what's that? Another quote that does really well on LinkedIn is, people don't leave bad workplaces, they leave bad managers. So yeah, I think leadership development is probably the core one.
And it's such an important point because, as you said, like a lot of people end up in leadership positions not necessarily because of their leadership capacity or capability. And when you were sharing that, I was like, yeah, I've never seen an example go well of a professional sporting team take their star player off the field, stick them on the sideline, and say, you're now responsible for the performance of the rest of the players. Oh, but
Yeah.
you're not actually meant to be on the field doing the doing. Like, that's going to go horribly for everyone. That the team's performance is going to tank, culture issues are going to start coming up. They're probably going to feel really frustrated on the sideline too, of like, hang on, I felt like I was performing really well and now I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it would be hard to admit to that. I know I've spoken to a lot of people who are new to leadership who are like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I also don't feel like I can say that because I've been promoted to this role. Like, I don't want to admit that I'm kind of flying blind here. And geez, that just undermines their own confidence and competence.
Yeah, definitely. And impacts the growth of the team, which is obviously going to then impact the engagement and happiness of the team. A leader, let's say that you were a technical expert and you got promoted to a leadership role, and your default is to do the doing, right? So when someone comes to you and says, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, the default is, I'll do it. So in doing that, yes, you might solve the problem and you think you're this hero, but really you've robbed that person of a development opportunity, of an opportunity to learn and potentially disengage them. So yeah, I think it all stems down to leadership. That leadership level are the ones really driving and modeling those behaviors and championing the culture expectations. So huge area to be focusing on.
Yeah, and for those who are listening to this conversation who are either in a leadership role or have ambitions to be in a leadership role, take that sentence home already, right? This idea of when you have that inclination to just jump in and solve the problem for your team or for your people, ask yourself, is this helping or am I robbing someone of the opportunity to grow and develop an upskill? Because
Yeah.
when you said that, I felt that in my core. I was like, I can point to times, even recently, where I've jumped in and I'm like, yeah, you know what? That was probably more on the robbing someone of an opportunity to upskill side than the genuine helping side. I
Yeah.
think we know within us. We just need to have little prompts like that to get us to introspect.
Definitely. I actually read a coaching book back before I worked in HR. I was a leader myself, and I read a book called The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. Have you have you read that one?
No, great book title though.
The 1 Minute Manager is a series of books, and one of them is called Meets the Monkey. I believe that's what it's called. 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey, and it's about that. The whole book is about the idea that you've got a monkey on your back. So when somebody comes to you and says, I need help with this thing. I've got this responsibility I need to do. They have the monkey. The second you say, actually, don't leave it with me, I'll take that, you've now got the monkey on your back. So how many monkeys are you carrying around? What is that preventing you from doing? What is that preventing you from, what value is that preventing you from delivering? So yeah, it's just about recognizing that you think you might be helping them, take some stress off them. They'll be pleased to get rid of that task. But really, overall, in terms of their engagement and job satisfaction, was that the right thing to do? Could you have collaborated with them? Could you have given them direction and guidance and let them have that learning opportunity?
The visual imagery in my head right now is bonkers. I'm just imagining an office full of raving, rampaging monkeys, just throwing files everywhere, breaking
Yeah.
things. And that may actually be part of, because I'm curious to ask you about the burnout epidemic that we see, particularly in HR and people and culture
Mm,
professionals. And we've been talking a lot about, okay, maybe people who are in HR are uniquely positioned in the workplace to drive these positive changes. They're not fully and solely responsible for them, I think is where we landed, but they do have the opportunity to drive it and lead it. But gee whiz, have I seen in organizations that we partner with just an under-resourced, under-supported, underfunded HR team that is stretched so thin doing the day-to-day requirements of their job that the idea of doing anything proactive or strategic is so hard for them to access. They're too busy fighting a room full of monkeys, essentially, right?
mhm.
And I know that this isn't just my experience that I've seen when I work with these organizations. I know I sent through to you beforehand a quote that I found quite interesting from a report done in 2024 by Sage that found that 84% of HR leaders frequently experience stress and 81% say that they're feeling burnt out.
Mm.
How can we possibly hope to drive these positive changes to the rest of the team when 4 out of 5 of people in HR are wrestling stress, burnout, and potentially a room full of rampant monkeys? What are your thoughts on this? How do we solve
Yeah.
this? It's a big question. Solve it for me in a minute. No,
No, what you have said is 100% what I'm seeing as well. Inside my membership, I work with HR professionals, and we're very much at the breaking point. I think it's never been a better time to work in HR. I think post COVID, with all of the, like I said, progressive practices and the shift towards more of a strategic approach needed rather than a reactive transactional HR. I think it's never been a better time to work in HR, but it's also never been harder. It is, not only are we supporting people through a really difficult time in the world right now, cost of living crises, mental health, all these things are impacting our people before they even walk in the door to start their shift for the day. So I think, though, as at its core, HR is a support role. We get into that role because we want to help people. We want to make a difference. We want to support people. And I think that on its own means that we care a lot. We are really invested in other people's success. And as a result, I think that means that we struggle to set boundaries. We find it hard to say no. We overcommit ourselves. We take on too much. And often we neglect our own needs, and it's at the detriment of our own, mental health and happiness. So I think that's the key one, is we just care a lot, and it comes home with us each day. I know when I worked back in corporate, I found it very challenging to switch off. And it just, that those stresses leave such little room for fulfillment or satisfaction. I also think too, just the emotional labor, the work that we do, can be really challenging. We're constantly supporting people, having really sensitive discussions, solving really complex problems, making tough decisions can get really draining. And on top of that, most of the time, well, most of the time is probably not true. A lot of the time, our stakeholders aren't agreeable. They aren't, we're dealing with resistance, conflict. We're dealing with people who are skeptical of us, so that we have to push so much harder to get our voice heard. And that as well can be exhausting. And juggling multiple responsibilities and all of these high stake decisions, it requires a lot of mental energy. And I think you talked about burnout, and I think it's not the physical burnout we're probably experiencing, it's the mental burnout. We're just drained. And the last one you talked about is that reactive mode. It's very hard to operate in a reactive mode. And I feel like in HR, we operate from that most of the time. We could have a perfect to-do list with our day looking really great. And then suddenly this comes in. Have you got 5 minutes? This thing's happened. And we're constantly in firefighting mode. And that is overwhelming and exhausting in itself. So it takes a certain type of person to work in HR. And contrary to what many people say, HR is a very challenging role to do.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned very clearly there the idea of the emotional and mental load on top of it as well. And actually, it reminds me of uh, quite a few people who come through our college to learn the skills and science of happiness, and learn things like boundaries, learn things like effective self-care, all those skills. We noticed a few years ago the common psychological trend, we called them like the burnt out helper. Their greatest strength was how much they cared. Their greatest weakness was they forgot to redirect some of that care back to themselves.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's such a common experience that we see in helping based professions, and in professions that are built around support and care. You mentioned just then that, and I like this message of hope that you've shared, that it is the arguably the best time to work in HR, but also a time that comes with its unique challenges. You mentioned a few of the societal ones there that people are wrestling with: cost of living crisis, mental health crisis being some big ones that people are wrestling with before they even walk in the door. And then when they do walk in the door, I'm curious to get your insight and perspective on some of the policy shifts that we're living through at the moment. And I know there's been some pretty dramatic political shifts that have led to a changing employee and working experience. The most obvious one is, we're seeing more and more large scale organizations now, in response to current administration in the US, rapidly roll back their DEI strategies.
Mm,
And, it feels like we went through a 5-year cycle of promotion to then a complete, I think of Newton's cradle sometimes with societal change, the 5 little silver balls on the desk, you lift one up, you let go, and there's a ricochet. It feels like we're in the ricochet. Have you seen this playing out in people's employee experience? Have you seen this playing out on the ground in
same.
New Zealand? Yeah.
Mm. I think it comes back to what we were talking about before, right, around policies versus people and them going hand in hand. I always tell my people that I'm coaching, and I talk about this a lot on LinkedIn, sometimes it's really easy to see because our work is people, right? HR, our work is people. If it was IT, our work would be computers. And if it were finance, it might be Excel spreadsheets. But our work is people. Sometimes it's hard to remember that when you're in the middle of a policy creation or a restructure or things like that. You just see a little name on a little piece of paper, and maybe they're square on an org chart, and that you forget that that's a person with a life, with responsibilities, with emotions. And I think that's what I mean when I say, like, what does it mean for our people? So yes, people might believe that, another big one is the return to work mandates. They might believe the best thing for the business is to have people back in the office for whatever reasons, whether that's better collaboration, or I actually can't think of any other reasons why people might think that might work. But
Any of the stand-in ones that people throw up as the
yeah,
go-to.
yeah,
We want to foster a collaborative workforce, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
you see
But
their collaboration
then
that's not existed.
Yeah, but then what does that mean for our people? That's that question I said before. It means that, you know, King Mom Sarah needs to find more childcare and has to get out of the door an hour earlier every day, and that stress and pressure. So by the time she walks in the door at 8:30, she's already probably had a day's worth of stresses just trying to manage that. It could be that person whose extracurricular activities need to change that. And you're only building, in my opinion, more stresses, more reasons to impact your staff's engagement. So Yeah, the DE&I is another one as well. Like, what does that mean? What the people who, fall into the categories, who identify themselves as, a diversity, or diversity hire. I hate saying that because it's not true, but they're worried now. They're concerned now. I know. I haven't been closely following the American landscape. But I know, the transgender rules and all those kind of changes and stuff, those people are scared. Those people are afraid to be themselves at work now. And that's going to obviously really impact their engagement and their job satisfaction. So it's the onflow, it's the ripples that we spoke about. So we need to think about that when we're building a policy. I know I've worked with some employers here in New Zealand around flexible working and how we can bring people back into the office and things like that. And what does it actually look like, though? What is it going to mean for our people? And what is the cost of both, pros and cons of both?
Mm. And, on that note as well, something that maybe I just needed this for myself, and the people who are listening can just take this if they resonate with it, or this might just be a little thing that Declan needed to hear for Declan. But to zoom out a little bit too, I think the conversation we're having reminds me, it's very much standing in front of me, that there's always societal change, there's always societal shift, there's always policy shift. But if we can come back to the core heart of humanity, which hopefully in this sense is, an amazing profession of HR professionals going, yeah, we work for the people, we're here for the people. Our work is people focused and people first. And let's remind ourselves, what is the impact this has on people? Then hopefully that allows us to create a better future and allows us to, navigate any big societal shifts and upturns. And yeah, we might potentially, I think we could talk about this all day, but as
Yeah.
we sort of reach the end of our conversation,
Yeah.
what are your hopes for the future of the profession? When it comes to all the stuff we've spoken about the employee experience, about workplace happiness, about the burnout crisis in HR professionals, about their role to play in driving positive change, what does Lisa hope for?
I think I kind of touched on it earlier, but I think the hope for everyone in HR would be, we want to be operating from a proactive standpoint than a reactive standpoint. We don't want to spend our days in disciplinary meetings and performance improvement discussions, dealing with fires, dealing with issues. We want to be working alongside the leadership team on initiatives, strategies. How do we make things better, faster, smarter? So for me, I think what you're doing is hugely important because you're really advocating for, people first practices, why happiness is a strategic advantage for your people. And I just hope more people buy into that and understand that, and then therefore engage HR in those discussions rather than, HR currently being viewed, or often currently being viewed as the place you go to when there's a problem, not the place you go to when you want to, be more strategic or help people be. I think at the end of the day, if you want your business to perform better, the only way is through your people. That's the only way. So I think the more people that understand that's what HR's purpose is, then the better, for sure. I think, though, there's a lot of fear. Like I said, there's a real shift towards this people first, expectations, and staff are just asking so much more of their employers now. And I know from working with clients, there's a real fear on what that means and not being able to meet those expectations. I actually had a conversation with one of my clients a few weeks ago they're electricians and they're in the trades. And he said to me, "Oh, I'm hearing all of this talk about flexible working and we don't do anything with flexible working. And I feel really pressured and stressed." And I was like, can you do flexible working? Like, you can't work from home, and they just worked themselves up into, I was like, what does flexible working mean? Well, maybe we can have them do their paperwork from home on a Friday afternoon. I was like, well, does that make sense? Who's going to go to the jobs on Friday afternoon? And so I worked with them and we came up with a really great solution. We actually ended up implementing a 9-day fortnight, but for them, they were just panicked by this idea that they can't deliver on all these things that people are expecting. And there has to be, at the end of the day, you need to run a business, right? You have to be able to meet your business needs in a way that resonates with your people.
And that's a really nice segue, actually, because I want to give an opportunity here for those who are listening who are in HR or people in culture, and you're like, yeah, I get this. I'm listening to this conversation going, this is stuff that I believe in. I would like to play a role in this, but maybe you're seeing that position where you're like, I don't actually know how to do that. Like, what does that mean to roll that out? What's the strategic ability? What's the capacity and resources that I need and the skills that I need to lead those changes within my organization or my employer? Lisa, can you talk to us a little bit about your membership for HR and people and culture professionals, as well as, I'm going to put you on the spot here, as well as the conference that you have coming up?
Yeah. Look, I think for me, my focus has always been on supporting HR people to build and grow their capabilities and their confidence. A lot of the training and development and qualifications and everything you get out there is often around technical HR expertise. So you're spot on. You might have done all the technical trainings. You know how this project should look. You know how to deliver it. But then the capabilities is, but I don't know how to get buy-in from the key stakeholders. I don't know how to, position this in a strategic way. Those are the things that you actually need, your communication skills, because your expertise is only going to be as good as you can communicate it. You could be the strongest, most strategic, most expert HR person, but if you can't communicate that in a way that's going to resonate, then it's just not going to work. So my focus has always been those soft, I hate that word, but soft skills development in HR professionals. Inside my membership, I can support a lot of people. There's a chat forum. They just come in and they say, I've got this challenge. What do we do? How do we approach this? They're uploading documents, sharing things. Everyone's kind of pitching in with their inputs and thoughts and stuff. I have bounce sessions every week where we come on and just chat about things that are happening and share ideas. So it's just a place to, like I said, just help get move these things forward, to use your voice and to use your credibility and build trust and all those things that you probably didn't learn so much in a lot of our studies and our work.
Yeah, and the masterminding effect that comes from that, of having all these professionals jump in together, share their insights, share their experience, not have to solve all this themselves.
Yeah.
I know is something that is, from my perspective, a great advantage to professionals who can tap into that,
Yeah.
either via the membership or the conference coming up. Do you want to give us the details and dates and a little nods to
So
the
the
conference?
conference is essentially the membership brought to life. So it's a day of, the focus is really on building confidence, building capabilities, and building your network. So we've got speakers on influence and negotiation. We've got a health and wellness coach talking about burnout and resilience. We've got a HR coach talking about leadership and strategic thinking. We've got a communications expert coming in to talk about speaking up, finding your voice. A lot of these are spoilers because I haven't yet announced these people, but it's just a great day. So it's scheduled for Thursday, the 31st of July at Trust Arena in Auckland. And it's just a chance for a room of HR people to get together and have some really good discussions.
Amazing. Well, you heard it here first, everyone. We're going to have the links to all of that in the show notes as well. So make sure you connect further with Lisa off the back of today. Make sure you find out more about the membership and the conference, especially if you are working in that HR and people and culture space and you want that community, that mastermind effect, and all the great resources that come with that, so you don't have to solve it all yourself. But for today, Lisa, thank you once again for coming on the show and sharing your insight and your expertise. I really value our conversations. I cannot wait to be delivering a talk together in person. I know it's coming up very shortly after people are listening to this episode. And for those listening, happy International Happiness Day.
Yeah, happy International Happiness Day. Amazing.
That officially brings us to the end of today's episode. Again, thank you for listening, and happy International Happiness Day. Whether you're listening to this on the day it launches or at another point in the year, I'm a big believer, and look, I'm biased, that I think International Happiness Day is every day, and every day is worth looking at happiness in ourselves and in our organizations. So as always, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with someone you think could use a little more happiness at work. Maybe even share it with your HR and people and culture professionals in your organization. And if you particularly loved the conversation today and you want to connect further with our guest, I highly encourage you to do so via the links in the show notes. You'll also see a link in there to find out more about our workplace happiness diagnostic and our workplace happiness services, so we can partner together to help your organization create a happier, healthier workplace. Everything you need is in the show notes as always. Until next time, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of How to Be Happy.